What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 19. I am your host, Marcus. Today's theme is about don't want it bad enough. Now, this is a theme that I came across on Reddit. I was reading a particular theme, and the particular individual was talking about self-help in general and how a lot of people just tell you to just do it. And it's hard because I've tried to explain this a couple different times. It is up to you. You have to find what drives you. And this always goes back to the question of why, what really drives you. But that is not really motivating. Ultimately, we are emotionally driven. And I've talked about emotional ignition before, and something that you need to apply to your life. Find that event that is going to drive you and go back and relive that event. Maybe it was a really sad time in your life. Maybe it was a really happy time in your life, but there was something that really moved you in life that changed your perspective on the world. Go back and relive that moment and then make the change. Constantly keep that thought, that idea in the forefront of your brain. You realize that by doing this, this provides that emotion you need to keep going. And, you know, it's coming up on my father's anniversary of the passing of his death. And not to be morbid or anything like that, but it's been 3 years. It is something that I've shared on my YouTube channel. It is something that has really changed my perspective in realizing that life is short, and to see the way my father, dedicated his life. He was an extremely hard worker. That is where I get my discipline to work very hard at specific things that I do. It is from him, and realizing that he was the one that, originally told me to go into the government, right? Get a pension and live the rest of your life at a young age, retiring. The only problem with that was the fact that, he was only into retirement, I believe it was 2 years before he got diagnosed with ALS. So after that being said, he did retire a little bit early, but ultimately, right, it was his time checked out. He got diagnosed with ALS, and it didn't take much long after that. He lived, 3 more years after that, but ultimately it slowly deteriorated his body. In that particular situation is what changed my perspective on a lot of different things. And you have events like that in your life, maybe not that dramatic. Maybe it was the birth of a child. It can be another one, right? Where that birth of a child gives you perspective on you need to provide for that child, and realize, well, what can I do to provide for my children or child, whoever it is? But ultimately, I'll understand that once you have that perspective shift, this is why just do it won't always work, because you have to have some kind of emotion tied to it. What is driving you? Is it anger? Is it happiness? Is it the fear of loss, right? Now, these things, you don't want to consistently use fear or anger or happiness or anything like that. You want to constantly be rotating the reasons to why you want to make a change. And so when coming across that thought and idea, and coming up on my father's anniversary, it has really caused me to reflect on a bunch of different things and the things that I have changed from that moment. And although living through that period, those first couple months, it was extremely hard. But what I found is that I was seeing the perspective almost instantaneously. And this is when you really know that your perspective is changed on the world, because it does become an instantaneous thing. It does become an overnight thing. My father passed. Yes, it took time to digest what just happened. But then I started to realize that I can't live this way anymore. I can't live in a system where I dedicate a strong majority of my life to just working 9 to 5. I can't do what I want. I'm abiding by someone else's rules. Now, I know that's easier said than done. Nobody wants to do that. You have to set yourself up. You have to put things in in line to be able to do what you want to do. You have to plant seeds along the way to be able to do those things that you want to do. So when reading this comment, just doing it doesn't work. I understand, because there's no drive there. There's no reason to why. And I can even date back to when I was a chubby kid and I hated it. Right? It's like, how much would I tolerate? How much more, name calling and fighting and all over different things would eventually get me to the point, to my turning point, right? My boiling point, where I said, this isn't where I'm going to do anymore. I'm going to make a change now. I found the emotion. I was so angry and frustrated with not just people picking on me, but with myself. How could I let myself do this? And so at that point, I started to, once I was able to start working out, I worked out a lot. And it's been a theme in my life, is where I continuously worked out as much as I can. And the thing is, I've had lapses where I've been injured and I wasn't working out, and I lost myself there because I had that emotion tied to that. And understand that we are emotionally driven. So to just do it, it is going to be hard. This is why I talk about looking for perspective, when I talk about looking for being curious and going out and exploring things, because if you don't find that ignition, you're not going to want to change. And a lot of times, especially when it comes to like things like relationships and stuff, it's extremely hard because there's a lot of emotion going on. And when dealing with this, to realize the painful side of what's on the other side, right? If you're in a really type of relationship that you feel it's just not working out, you know what to do, but you don't execute on it, right? What is really holding you there? It's uncertainty always comes to forefront. This is why I bring up a lot of the same things, because a lot of the same things are what trigger you to get you going. And you have to embrace the uncertainty and understand that every change is painful. Sometimes you just need to do it because at that point that it's not going to get any better from here. You have to make the change. You have to make the change. So I talk about how much more will you tolerate. You're so fed up. If your energy levels are depleted, if you hate going home, if you hate doing other things with the person you're with, this is a big indicator. And I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you can see it. But you continue to tolerate it. To what point? To what extent? A couple more days, a couple more months, a couple more years. This is where it reflects back to that time in which we have a limited amount of time in our lives. We can't change people. We can only change ourselves. If we attempt to try to change people, we will push those people further away, and people will dig their heels in even deeper. They will not change because it goes back to how you change. You have to want to change. You can't force change on somebody else. And even reflecting back on my relationships, right? Trying to force change, it's not going to happen unless that person wants to change. This is why you hear about all these quotes and stuff about you be the change that you seek, because that is what it is. You have to want to change. The world just doesn't change because you think it into existence, or you're trying to impose your will upon the world. The world will always impose its will upon you. Now you can adjust and change it to where you have control of the way you react to the world. You have control of your direction in life by removing things in your life that no longer suit you. And I've thought about this a lot, and this doesn't even come about relationships, right? I've been talking about minimalism a lot as well, and how much of a big key this is. Less is a lot more. Now, what does that mean? That means you have less relationships, but high quality relationships. You have less things, but high quality things in your life. You have less stresses in your life, but a high quality of life. And you do this by thinking and analyzing your day, what is going on, what is taking away your energy, what is giving you energy, and then making the tough choice. Yes, it's a tough choice. I'm not saying it's not easy, but knowing that on the other side, things will get better, even though there's uncertainty. You have to, this goes back to a lot of the different thoughts and ideas I've had and big changes I've making in my life currently. And that's because of the fact that you have to be okay with uncertainty. You have to realize that, you have intuition for a purpose. It is your compass, your internal compass. A lot of times, that side of your brain, that logical side of your brain will prevent you from doing the correct thing, prevent you from doing the thing that will make the biggest impact, that will make your life a much more happier and fulfilling life. Is intuition or following your heart, whatever you want to call it. But you have to listen. And sometimes, we continuously tune that voice down, that feeling down, because it doesn't make sense. But if we just went through with it, this is why I talk about breathing and meditation and being present, because it allows you to turn up the volume on that intuition. So when you need it, when you call upon it, you can get it. Now, the funny thing about intuition is it only gives you next steps. It doesn't give you a great elaborate plan. You can have direction, you could want to go in that direction, but this is where I talk about you can have the blueprints and think you're all planned and ready to go, and it never works out that way. This is where intuition comes in. It gives you the next step. You know where you want to go. You hone in on the intuition and it looks for the next steps. Okay. Well, I'm really stressed out here. I need something here. What is it? If I practice meditation, if I practice breathing, I hone in on the intuition and it gives me the answer when I need it, not when I want it, when it's needed. So stop the stressing. The more I've been doing meditation for the many years that I've been doing it now, and for the breathing techniques and all these other things that I do in practicing comfort zones, practicing the uncertainty, right? Because that's one of the biggest ones is not knowing, but realizing, what? Today could be my last day. And I know talking about, death, right? The famous thing you've always heard, right, is live each day like you're dying. You're going to die. Because it is possible. We tend to forget it is possible. We like to think about everything that is impossible instead of thinking of the things that are actually possible. So if you live today, what exactly would you change? Would you just do it then? Then you would, because you wouldn't have anything to lose. There is no tomorrow. That's where the just do it comes in. Is you just need the perspective, the understanding of where people are talking about. Yes, you need emotion. If you're coming from a place where you're not really thinking about these other different concepts and ideas, this is why it's important to think for yourself, to separate yourself. Now, the particular individual that was talking about this particular thing, about how just doing it doesn't work, it doesn't unless you think of life in that way, that it's going to end tomorrow. What would you do? We would all live completely different lives. Your mindset would change in a second. If I only had tomorrow, what would I do? And even though it seems scary, because there's so much uncertainty, you got all these things that you've accumulated through your life that you don't want to lose. What are you holding on to? Material things? Relationships that no longer serve you? This is what matters. What matters is to tune in, hone in, and just live your life. And again, the more I do this, right? Sometimes I'm not saying I'm 110% on this all the time. I come to a point where I accept it and then I go through with it. And then I realize that I'm actually doing okay. What am I so worried about? It's a whole fear factor, right? It all ties in together. The fear factor of the uncertainty, and there's nothing there. But when I embrace it and I just let it be and stop stressing about it, the things come into the life. They present itself. You don't see it till after the fact. And one of the funniest thing was right after my dad's passing, I took a brief hiatus from work. I quit my job and I started working on my own. I started Discover Ignite. I started doing a lot of other different things. I took a break. I needed a break. I was so stressed out. I didn't know how to deal with anything. And at that point in my life, right, there was a lot of uncertainty and I was stressing so much. And when you look at that, things happen for a reason. I ended up going back to work. And then what happened a couple months later? The pandemic hit. It's funny how things work out when you are not worried about it. And it never makes sense. None of it makes sense. This is why it's important to be in the moment, to live in the moment. Yes, you should worry about consequences, right? You shouldn't go out and just do whatever you want. I don't agree with that. You should in a way, right? You should go out and be curious and do it, and just do it. I'm not saying going out and ruining your life, right? There's always consequences to the things that you do. But you shouldn't be in a life where your life is just not enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable and you're burnt out before your day even gets started, that is too hard. Why continue a life like that? And that leads to anxiety and depression and overthinking and all these other different things that don't help you. Like even coming on Discover Ignite, I do this to help other people in the way I've found and the things that I've gone through and how I've overcome them. And I share those thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and how I've navigated it. Because I know a lot of times, a lot of stuff is very repetitive and it seems like it doesn't actually work, or it may seem too far-fetched, but until you actually deep dive and dedicate yourself to it, and that, even like the other day, on my Ignite Thursdays that I do every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on my last Ignite Thursday, I talked about this, about the sacrifice. You need to sacrifice some things. Sacrifice those things that don't really mean anything. TV time, right? TV time is enjoyable. I'm not saying totally get rid of it. We should eliminate a good chunk of the majority of it so you can start doing things that matter to you. Because you realize that days turn into months and turn into years, and you lose who you are. You don't like who you are anymore. I've done it a couple of different times throughout my life. And, I feel bad about those times. But when I look back, I'm like, that was a good lesson. What not to do. Always put yourself first. Your physical health, your mental health has to come first. And especially during a time like this, we've really realized that mental health is a real thing. We're being locked away. We're not being able to communicate with other people, right? Communicating online isn't the same thing. We have to be in close proximity to people or have conversations with people. Texting isn't a big thing. It doesn't really help. It helps to an extent, but you really have to put yourself out there, to live your life, right? Stop watching a movie of the life that you want. Stop playing a game with the life that you want. Start, talking about other people's lives with the life that they have, that you're upset that you don't have, because then you haven't taken any action to create the life that you want. Now, what is hard here is to understand that essentially what we've all seen and noticed, and this is something I talk about when I talk about, the 3 different pillars and stuff that I've always talked about. right? You are given a perspective around health, are given a perspective around finances, you're given a perspective around communication, around all these other different things that you don't really know about. It is up to you to obtain knowledge about these things. I share a lot of different thoughts and ideas and perspectives here to help you with that, and realize that these things can change your life if you would deep dive into it and dedicate the time to it. Sacrifice specific things in your life. You can really see how you can change your life, as opposed to going on Instagram and thinking about, wow, I really wish I had their life. Or a lot of people fall for that scam of, look at my Lambo and I made all this money and all this blah, 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 blah. The biggest thing is the people that have the money, they don't expose it like that. Right? A good majority of them probably drive, beat up cars. They don't live in fancy houses. They don't do all these things, because what matters is what's inside, internally. And realizing this, that once you have enough money, once you have all these different things, then it becomes, well, what is my purpose? Where if you just found your purpose from the beginning, being curious about things, finding those pockets of motivation, continue on pushing and pushing and pushing, developing new relationships, new networks with people that have bigger, brighter ideas than you have, perhaps cutting off relationships along the way that no longer serve you, and living a life that is enjoyable, as opposed to watching it on TV and then just looking forward to every night, every Tuesday night at 8:00 is when I'm happy. You need to make it to where it is permanent. Now, happiness isn't a permanent thing. You aren't just going to night switch it, hit the switch, and then you're just happy for the rest of your life. It comes just like motivation. Everything comes in waves. It's just embracing it and living with it. Finding your curiosity and just doing it at that point. Finding what motivates you. What's your why? I think your why, you can't just cement your why. You can have a big overarching why onto that big overarching destination that you want to get to, but you're going to need to find those pockets of your reason why. Maybe I ran across something that really excites me, some new piece of information that essentially allows me to see the opportunity that is there. And even for myself, the more opportunities I find, the more excited I get about it. I find the next pocket of motivation, the next pocket of opportunity that exists, that again was right underneath my nose. But it's having a mind that's thinking, you know what, it's just not going to happen. You know what, I don't know what this guy is talking about. He's just blabbering on about all this different stuff, right? And it seems impossible until it's possible. And there are many different examples of this throughout history, right? If one man can do it, another man can, or woman, right? If it seems too good to be true, like they say, it normally is, but this is something that you have to embrace, and things align. Yes, you'll still have ups and downs. Ups and downs are just a normal thing. Your body is just made that way. Yes, you're going against a grain when you make progress in your life. You're making change in your life that is painful. I'm not saying that doing all these things that I talk about allows change to not be painful. Change is a painful process in general. I've talked about the reasons why, right? Naturally, you're rewiring your brain. Your brain doesn't like that. But once it's changed, it's not painful anymore. It's the normal. It's just that initial stages into changing your perspective on something is hard to digest. But once you get it down, then it's much easier. It almost becomes, you can almost gamify it, but more so you get an enjoyment, you get a adrenaline rush when you realize that just by changing my perspective, look at the opportunity I've opened. So you start looking for more things. And this is something, this butterfly effect I've talked about, that started really with me in the plant-based diet. I've made dramatic changes, but it was based off of what society expects you to do, to go back to college, to do this and open up other opportunity for me. But when I went on my own and I started reading and getting perspective and understanding other people's thoughts and ideas and things like that, it allowed me to open up my mind to different things. And I couldn't be resilient of those things. I had to be open-minded. And I know that can be hard, but it's something you have to practice. Every time you feel like you don't agree with it, you have to stop yourself and just say, okay, right now, what I really need to do is just to listen at this point, just to take in the information, come up with my own thought, my own idea, my own conclusion, and then start executing on what I need to do. Because a lot of times you may not have that motivation. You may not have something that you lose sense of time and self to want to go do. That's why getting out and doing things, joining groups, experiencing things that you've always wanted to do. Life is short, right? That's my perspective. Life is short. Embrace the uncertainty, whatever it is. If I, go and try to learn how to skate and I'm turning 40, right? I can't skate. If I fell on my face and people were laughing, so what? I'm trying to learn something I want to do. Not really something I want to do, but if it was something I wanted to do, I would just suck it up and know that's only a matter of time before I achieve it. And that is what life is about. And the thing is 90% of people won't dedicate enough time to it. That's why when you say it's not just enough, just do it, it's hard because you have to grind through. You have to have a destination. If you say you want to get healthy, do you really want to get healthy? Do you have a reason to why to get healthy? Because you're battling against yourself. You're battling against your programming because of all the years of the routines you've been in. You've programmed yourself to get you to where you are today. And so you're going to have to change that by forcing yourself to just do it, or to find the desire, or be no longer tolerant of your situation. But that is totally up to you. Nobody's going to come in your life and tell you something. I mean, they can, but you have to be open to it. If you're not open to it, it's not going to happen. Like myself, when I got into a lot of self-development stuff, I was open to it. I've heard about it. I've heard a lot of negative and a lot of positive things about it, but I never got into it. But there was a time in my life where I was accepting of opening up about it. And it opened up a whole new world, and I've learned so much. And I continue to learn, right? Because education just doesn't stop at high school or college. Continued education is huge. And I myself, once I finished college, I was like, whew, thank God, I don't have to do any more learning. That's not true, right? We seek change. We want to better our lives. We want to better ourselves. If you're not changing all the time, this doesn't have to be big dramatic changes. You're just having a progression to something more, to something better. This is where you find the joy. You find those little pockets of motivation, those little pockets of happiness along the way. And this is what leads you to keep going. And then you're no longer asking yourself that maybe I don't want it bad enough. And then you start going into the opposite road of anxiety and depression and all these other things. Where you can just look for the pockets of motivation. Stop talking negative to yourself. Stop telling yourself you can't do it. Stop worrying about uncertainty. Embrace it and do it. This is where just do it does matter. Just do it. If you can't find your why, Find a point, lowest point or highest point. Relive that moment. What did you tell yourself in that moment? Because at one point in your life, you were probably there and you told yourself, I will no longer do this. And then somehow you relapse back into old habits. Relive that moment, what it felt like. Because if you continue along the journey, right, you're going to have other moments like that. But to be more resilient when those moments come, have an emotional ignition to want to break on through that and realize I have the tools to set me up to just do it.